Lagos. Welcome to another episode of E4E Attract, our interview series where we speak to people that operate in the African startup and venture capital ecosystem. And today we have with us Bas Hochstenbach. He is the co-founder and partner at Entrepreneurs for Entrepreneurs. That is E4E as an acronym, Africa. It's a transformation-driven VC fund that was launched in July 2020. Bas has significant experience in both Europe and in Africa, and he's going to share a lot of insights today with us as regards startups, fundraising, and the perspective of investors into Africa. Bas, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
Thank you for having me, Tunji, and I'm doing well here from Cape Town, SA.
Okay, good to know. So I think let's meet you personally and professionally. You were once upon a time at McKinsey, and now you are involved in E4E. You know, it seems as if you've had a very rounded career. So we would like to meet you professionally and personally. How did Bas end up at E4E?
Okay, that's a good question, and I'll be brief. So I'm from the Netherlands, as you might hear from my accent. I've been on the continent here for 17 years. Prior to that, indeed, worked at McKinsey and Company, a company that is unfortunately not without its faults on this African continent these days. But that was, that's all after my time. In 2004, I moved from the McKinsey job to East Africa. I lived in Tanzania for 5 years. And there started an ecotourism company, so lodges and camps in the bush and all the logistics, vehicles, guides, everything that came with it. Did that company with great pleasure for about 12 and a half years, moved to South Africa in that period, and had babies, started a family as well, and after about 10 years, we won some wonderful awards with that company called Asalia. It's still there. It's struggling in COVID times with tourism, but it's doing. It's a good company and it's still doing well. But after 10 years and winning some great awards with that company, I really started to notice that, I started to think about the earlier stage again. And that's sort of, between the decision to leave a company that you co-found and the execution, there's usually some time. So for me, there were 2 years still in between. And then indeed in 2016, I left the executive domain of the company and started getting involved in early stage. There's more to talk about, but in 2 seconds, from early stage investing and helping companies with strategy and fundraising as a lone wolf, that turned into a bit of an angel, sort of informal angel syndicate. And then after an invitation of the SASME Fund, which is a very sort of high profile fund here in South Africa, a fund of funds investing in early stage funds. They invited us to apply to become a fund, and we decided to take the jump then from being sort of informal angels to more of a formal venture capital fund.
Okay, thank you for that. Before we go into a bit deeper into the emanation of Entrepreneurs for Entrepreneurs, I would like to ask you, with your background from McKinsey, which is a very structured environment, as we all know, what quick advice and what issues do you see as regards startups and their lack of actually establishing key elements like corporate governance, risk management tools and structures, and also just having a very, very automated way of doing their business? How does it hold them back, and what advice do you have for startup founders in Africa?
Gee, yeah, that's a good question and a broad question. So let me try to give some specific answers, and then we might dive into some of these aspects. But so I think if I'm involved in some early stage companies in Europe still, as some friends and old business contacts, have gotten me involved there. And if I sort of make a quick comparison and then try to get to some advice, which will be, generic and therefore, a little bit wrong, of course, for everybody. But I think the biggest thing would be to really focus on building a great business. And that sounds like the biggest open door there is, but I think like a real obsession about your business model, getting it right, learning every day about the feedback from the market is really important. And some risks that I see here, one specific risk that I notice in East Africa and again here in South Africa is for there's a lot of accelerators around, there's a lot of sort of softer money around, and sometimes that's a great thing, but it can also lead to early stage businesses becoming a little bit sort of, jumping from one accelerator to the next, or jumping from one small pot of funding to the next. And exactly. I would say, that may serve you for some time, but really the focus should be on building a great business and making sure you put everything in place for that, and which usually means that sort of accelerator and soft funding phase should be something that you don't dwell too long in. So I think that's really something. And then as for the structured environment, indeed, I think we are, when I said that I was a venture capital fund, that we were, as E4E Africa, a venture capital fund now, I think, that always comes with some hesitation. I think I still see myself and my colleagues do too as sort of entrepreneurs that invest. But I think, so even though we are pretty informal and pretty entrepreneurial in our approach, I would say another piece of advice that I would give entrepreneurs on this continent is that we like to keep it informal, but in order to do so, it really helps when companies, potential investee companies, have their hygiene in order when it comes to good presentation. Simple financials, doesn't need to be complicated, but simple financials, be very responsive when you start engaging with a party, make sure you are on the ball and you stay on the ball. So, so I think focus on building a great business, having good hygiene. And then I think the most important thing, what I really wish for this continent, if you speak to people in Silicon Valley, then everybody and his dog believes that they're going to have the next unicorn. And I don't believe in sort of ambition without underpinning of reality, but sort of psychologically, what I wish for this continent is for entrepreneurs to believe that they can build something that is really, relevant beyond their immediate environment, beyond their country, even beyond this continent. A lot of the world looks like Lagos or looks like Johannesburg, so there is no reason why you can't set up a business that isn't relevant also in Sao Paulo or Bombay or other places around the world. So so some structure, some diligence in your business planning, but also some realistic optimism and belief that you can make it.
Yeah, I like that part where you said ambition underpinned by reality. I get Funded Africa, we call it crazy but steeped in reality. That's what excites investors. Yes,
I like it. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go a bit deeper into why you decided to become an investor in African startups. What potential did you see, and what in terms of adding value, where did you see E4E actually coming in?
Yeah, so couple of things there. So firstly, we saw as E4E Africa and as experienced entrepreneurs doing angel investments, we saw a real sort of gap and a real opportunity in experienced entrepreneurs getting involved with early stage entrepreneurs. And so our team of E4E Africa is a group of experienced entrepreneurs. But we're also busy launching, and actually you're the first to know. So here's your scoop. But we're busy setting up something that we call Entrepreneurs Club, which is essentially us bringing in a bigger circle of experienced entrepreneurs to support the early stage entrepreneurs. So I think that is our biggest value add. is to make sure that people that from this continent, but also from abroad, that care about entrepreneurial success on this continent, that they sort of get involved. And sometimes it's money, but oftentimes it's also just hands-on help. It's networks, it's mentoring, it's having walked the journey before and knowing exactly where a company's at and helping. So I think so that E4E Africa, Entrepreneurs for Entrepreneurs, that's I think really the core thing. And then maybe two other things. One is I think there is a bit of there is still a lack of funding, and especially also a lack of funding that is really aimed at sort of building early stage companies, instead of sort of, conservative money that really looks to control and reporting. So we're really trying to provide real entrepreneurial capital, with the promise that we are obsessing about the success of the business model and not obsessing about how many pages of reporting you can deliver us. And then lastly, maybe most importantly for us is, I think it's not exclusive to Africa and also not exclusive to South Africa, but certainly very prominent here in South Africa. I think historically funding and access to opportunity has been a bit, has not been sort of well distributed, has not been fairly distributed. And there's been an underfunding of Black entrepreneurs, and there's been an underfunding of female entrepreneurs. And whilst we don't rule out white guys like me for funding, it's certainly so that we are putting special emphasis on funding Black and female entrepreneurs. They can be exclusively that, but also mixed teams we very much welcome, because we would like, the South Africa, specifically for the country that we operate in, we'd like the South Africa in 10 years' time not to look the same of the South Africa of today, and we're really trying to put our money where our mouth is on that. So that's a couple of areas of our contribution.
Okay, thank you for that. That's fantastic. You mentioned something about the focus on supporting entrepreneurs in Africa, which is alluding to a mentorship. I am going to come back to that. I'm going to also plug it into something else you mentioned about accelerators in terms of establishing kind of standards that we have in Africa. But let's talk a bit about your investments. Do you want to run us through perhaps your most recent investment or your most important investment, and what was the significance to either South Africa or to the African continent as a whole?
Yeah, it's hard to choose. We've made some nice investments, and there's a couple of good ones on the horizon. Maybe very quickly on the horizon, we're actually we're very pleased and very impressed with the pipeline. We have two very good fintech businesses in our sort of far advanced in our pipeline, and they're really a good combination of what we very much like. On the one hand, a high quality business model that can scale, and on the other hand, if it scales, we believe it's really impactful in a positive way on society. In both cases of these fintechs, we think there's a lot of scope for sort of better access to fair financial products for big parts of the population of this continent, and these two models both play into that. So both scalable and very positive if they would work. And then we also have our eye on to sort of very smart businesses in leveraging technology in sort of industrial value chains, but helping to create more more sustainable industries. So we're very and there's real IP in those. So we're very pleased to see the quality of the pipeline there. Maybe as for existing investments, I'm very busy with two at the moment. One is Yebo Fresh. Yebo Fresh is a smart grocery delivery service for, let's say, the 90% of South Africa. Really interesting business with big growth potential, but also with, again, big impact potential. You know, the hassle of the monthly shopping run, the
last mile,
safety that comes with it, the costs. It's sadly, it's not cheap to be poor on this continent. So that's a really, so Yebo Fresh, really important business in the grocery delivery space. And then I'm also very busy at the moment with the growth of a company called Vula Health. And Vula is a telemedicine company that sort of makes sure that the right patients accesses the right doctor at the right time. And, you know, certainly for the rural population on this continent, that's long been a problem. How do you access an eye specialist when you live in a small village? And technology makes that possible. So again, that's a real scalable company whereby if they succeed in what they're doing, and they're actually doing very well already, that they can have a real sort of impact on you know, large groups of people. So yeah, that's some highlights of the pipeline and some highlights of what we have.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. You mentioned something about industrialized value chains. Now, as an organization, Get Funded Africa is always excited, and we always, as much as possible, encourage potential founders to look at opportunities where they can digitalize value chains. In Africa, there are so many opportunities. These value chains already exist. If they can, in a very concise and innovative way, apply some sort of technology model, then they have businesses. What kind of advice would you have for entrepreneurs to, it might not, instead of, you know, seeking to be innovative and seeking to disrupt, how can you encourage them to identify these existing value chains and to plug a sort of startup into them?
And to plug what into them? Sorry,
to plug a startup or a business into these existing value chains.
Yeah, I think that's a huge question. So I would say one of the real sort of shortcomings, and I can't speak for the continent as a whole with the same knowledge as I have of Tanzania and Kenya to an extent, and South Africa here. But I would say the connection between these startups and the incumbent industry is, of course, very important, and that's something that we really also want to work on. In general, and specifically for the startups we invest in. And I think so for startups, when you want to play in a specific industry, I think it's really good to try to reach out to the incumbents in your industry and sort of learn sort of where they're at, where the opportunities lie, and also how there is a scope to collaborate with them. That may sound difficult, you know, when you're a 28-year-old startup person and you want to talk to a big incumbent. That's hard, but I would say that's maybe also where organizations like yours and mine can assist, right? And it begins, I guess, it begins with the entrepreneur just figuring out indeed, like, okay, how do I make my business successful? And if it's really important to talk to, you know, a big bank, for instance, in Nigeria for my business model, then just, you know, make it happen. I know it's hard, but you know, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to tackle the hard problems, and you need to prioritize the ones that you do need to. You know, you need to prioritize doing the things that will make your business successful. So I think that for me is a really important one. Then as for the opportunities themselves, well, I think we can certainly see that there's a lot of similar sort of issues, and therewith a lot of opportunities, as they often, issues and opportunities are often the flip side of the same coin. And for instance, when you talk of, for instance, a lack of access to the economy for a lot of people, therein lies a big opportunity in many value chains. And also, I think Africa and many industries have often had a bit of the short end of the stick when it comes to sort of market access to the global economy of trading in goods. And for instance, we're busy now with a sort of sustainable forestry product trading platform, and really there you can see that particularly smallholder farmers, they've really struggled to get access to the world market, and that's where technology can help, right? Like how does a small farmer talk to IKEA or a big global buyer? Well, nowadays there is a possibility for technology to enable that. So I think the inclusion of people into the economy and the inclusion of African products into the world market are, for instance, two examples of business models where we see opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for that. Interesting, you mentioned agriculture. There are a lot of agricultural platforms that are springing up around Africa. And, they're just like you said, they are providing the opportunity for smallholder farmers to gain access into markets they could not have imagined before.
Yes.
You also mentioned something about startups collaborating with corporates. For us, we can also define that as just simply asking, what problems do you have and how do you think I can solve them? That's another unique way that startups can actually create opportunities for
Yes.
Yes. Okay, next question. For South Africa, Tanzania, how would you advise startups? What do you advise startups to do to actually attract investors?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of maybe what I just said. So we are, certainly as E4E Africa, we are very much, I guess, substance over form, right? So we want to see that an entrepreneur really understands their business, is really passionate about solving an actual problem. And so I think for me, that would be the number one thing, just a good entrepreneur with the integrity of attempt, working hard at making it happen. So for us, that would be really the entrepreneur and then his or her sort of business plan, but the integrity and the discipline of going for it, that's I think really number one. But then indeed, in order to become fundable, I think that is where sort of that hygiene also kicks in, of just making sure that you sort of master a little bit the language and the habits of talking to funders in terms of, you don't have to become a reporting machine at all. I would almost say on the contrary, but make sure that the information that you have on who you are, what you do, where you want to be going, how you get there, that you answer those questions again, in that sort of ambitious, realistic way, where people see where you're going, believe that you're going there, and see you acting that on a daily basis. So I think there's no rocket science here. It's really a genuine, hardworking entrepreneur with that can articulate where he or she is at and where he or she is going. That's really, I think, the fundamental for us.
Okay, thank you. Mantra for today is ambitious but realistic. Ambitious but realistic. Okay, what advice would you give to these kind of people in terms of planning their exit and achieving their dreams?
Yeah, good question. And in answering this question, I think the first thing I might have to say is whatever I'm about to say is coming from a mildly privileged sort of background. So, mind you, not every European is rich, and I come from a pretty humble sort of background in Europe. But be that as it may, it's fair to say that most Europeans have sort of one extra chance at failing something without immediately getting into sort of fundamental issues. So when I moved from McKinsey to being an entrepreneur, I moved from a multi-thousand euro salary to actually paying $100 a month. So my salary went divided by 30, and I could be all cool about that, but I realized that to a degree I had that opportunity to do so because I had a lofty salary before. So anyway, so I'm very mindful of not saying something here that is just unrealistic in the context of many on this continent. Be that as it may, I would say, dare to take a step and don't burden, like for many people that have a decent job now, there's an opportunity to return in that job or to return in a similar job. And that means that you should try to, if you really want something, then dare to go for that, right? Like, and also dare to let go. Like people that come to me and say, well, I want to be an entrepreneur, but hey, man, I don't want to make any salary sacrifices and this and that. You think like, well, look, man, you can't have it all, right? So I think, just to dare to go for it, I think is an important thing within the realities of your own sort of personal and family circumstances of, how much risk you can take. And if there is lesser risk you can take, then I think just spend a little bit more time ahead of taking the risk in really sort of interviewing people, understanding if your plan is just a pipe dream or if it has some reality, making sure that you have people, that you build up some people that you can, call on, bank on. But then at the end of the day, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you got to take the plunge at some stage. So there is an element of risk taking, and you got to take it if you want to do it.
In terms of business models, what advice do you have for startups in terms of how they can improve in Africa generally?
Yeah, that's a very generic
from your experience or what you've seen.
Let me give you maybe one or two answers, and then you can you can dig for the gold in there, and we can carry on. So I think so. First of all, it's a generic question, and I don't have a generic answer as to what is the right business model. But I do think a couple of things. So sometimes I see sort of ambitious plans in established industries that are subsequently sort of disconnected from those established industries. So firstly, I would say, make sure that if you have a plan that services an existing industry, that you also understand how it connects to that existing industry. So B2B connections can be really useful. And oftentimes a B2B business model at the start of your business can be much easier than sort of this dream of, I'm going to B2C retail to 100 million people in 3 years flat kind of thing. So I think that is one thing. The second thing is, I would say, look over your immediate horizon of your sort of geographical environment or your sort of demographic environment, and really think about at what scale can my business model be relevant, and try to, even though you might start in Nigeria and growth into another African country is far on the horizon, I would say, don't wait too long with thinking if and how your business model can be relevant for the larger world, because you might get input there that inspires you, and also that sort of really informs how to set up your business model, how to set up your service, your product for the right markets from the beginning, rather than thinking later on with scaling like, oh shit, the rest of the world didn't look exactly like Nigeria, and now I need to sort of fundamentally re-engineer. So, but I would say do so in the comfort that, not everybody on this continent has the privilege of travel, but really, a lot of Africa is not, it's not the lost continent; it's the growing continent. And a lot of cities in Africa, societies in Africa, in different countries in Africa, there are great similarities with, let's say, India, with South American countries. Maybe not the language, but yes, the structure of society. So I would say, when you think about your business model sort of thoroughly, do that in the comfort that there is a lot in the world that might be like your place. So there might be intrinsic scalability there.
Yes, and because of that intrinsic scalability and the similarities, we also encourage entrepreneurs and founders to just do a bit more research. The kind of startup that you think might be innovative might actually just exist, and you might have a model or some type of template to actually just feed off on. Now, you mentioned something about mentorship. We've seen a lot of startups that have passed through accelerators, no criticism of accelerators in Africa, but we still see that to a large extent, as you know, because it's a very difficult journey, and there's a lot of skill, knowledge, and information that is required to actually have something that could look like a successful startup which can attract funding. So we want to ask, in terms of mentorship, what advice would you have for startups to actually depend more on this and seek it in terms of growing their businesses?
Yeah, I think so. First of all, on accelerators, I also think that they definitely have a place in the universe, and they can be really helpful in sort of working with startups to build sort of the hygiene of what's your product, service, how do you communicate about it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think startups, sort of accelerators and incubators and what have you, they can really play a role. However, at some stage, I think businesses are all very specific, right? They are in very specific value chains. They're in very specific sort of business models, you know, B2B, B2B, B2C, B2C, etc. And I think at some stage, an entrepreneur should really make the transition when you seek mentors, and an accelerator in a way is a sort of a mentor environment. But I think at some stage, typically, businesses really start to profit from very specific sort of support. And I think really specific mentors that really understand the business, are committed to helping it grow, can be really important. I would say how to go about that. I think it shouldn't be too hard to identify people that can be very relevant for your business model, whether it comes to the tech of your business model or when it comes to the market access of your business model. I would say try to find those people that can be relevant to you. And then I think a lot of people actually are very happy to consider supporting startups. Particularly when a startup has, you know, both the growth potential and does something positive to your country, then I think there's typically a lot of inclination to support. I would say, in order to make that support really tangible and meaningful, make sure that you build a role that sort of is win-win for both. And I think most people are happy to help a bit. But if you really want somebody to help you longer term and really sort of substantially, then as a startup, like, you might want to give away even a few % of your shares over time to a mentor that is really super meaningful. And I would say, so don't only bank on goodness. When somebody can really help you, you know, it's great to make it sort of a win-win business proposition for both, whereby the mentor also profits if the business becomes successful. That really, you know, that is really the difference between the mentor picking up the phone when he's on a holiday and the mentor saying, "Sorry, man, I'm really busy in the next 2 weeks."
Yeah, nobody knows it all. Skill is and knowledge is not unlimited in terms of access. Okay, let's begin to close this. So outside of you know, basically being an investor and being steep in business, how do you unwind? What interests do you have? Do you read books? Let's get to do a bit more personal level.
Yeah, I think unwinding, unwinding I do in nature and on mountains. So I still have my background in working in nature, and every time I am in nature, I'm happy. Luckily, Cape Town is a place surrounded by mountains and nature. So that's what I do to take a rest. And actually, sometimes for entrepreneurs, when they want to talk to me and they want to get the best of me, I invite them to walk the mountains with me. And then, you know, we can't take notebooks, so you know, we have to stay on point. We can't remember 23 pages of notes, so we have to be, you know, it's a good place to be creative, and it's a good place in nature to not, you know, to not take too much with, and really focus on the core of what you wanted to talk about. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. What advice would you have for Get Funded Africa as we do our best to support investor-ready startups in Africa?
Yeah, great question, and I really like what your organization is doing. So compliments for you and your role in the ecosystem. Yeah, and I think So I would hope a couple of things. So first of all, I really hope for the continued emancipation of this continent. So, there shouldn't be a discount on African startups, and there is no reason why African startups can't be successful on a global scale. So first of all, I would say, let's keep on working on sort of the self-confidence of this continent on a global scale, and I think you guys can help there, also when marketing to foreign investors. The second thing is, I hope that sort of soft financing and aid and grants can be very useful, but I also hope that we can, like, as much as possible, entice commercial partners, commercial investors to take an interest and see this as see our continent as a market to build businesses and be successful. So I would say, please also focus on bringing on board the commercial investors. And maybe lastly, indeed, you can keep helping on an ecosystem that sort of is entrepreneurial and not sort of death by reporting and PowerPoint. so let's make sure that good entrepreneurs do what it takes to get funding, but at the same time don't get too caught up in too much time going to pitching, to documenting, to reporting, to speaking to 30 investors to getting one, to really match make between a good entrepreneur and the right investor that gets that business model, and there's always a bit of sort of discipline in fundraising, and that's good. It sharpens your business model. But I sometimes see entrepreneurs here where I think, gee, it looks like for months and months in a row, too much of your time goes into fundraising. So for you guys to help with that journey and sort of do the right matchmaking, I think that can be of great help.
Okay, we'll continue to do our best. We have venture building services aligned to what we do, which is our specialty in terms of matching investor-ready startups to investors that are ready. If any final words of advice for entrepreneurs and in regards how your organization is going to contribute to this continent in the next 1 or 2 years, then we'll sign off from there.
Well, gee, it's been a challenging time, but as you've seen on the stock exchange, actually many tech-enabled models have done well. So it's a challenging time. I'm sure people have insecure sort of financial environments after this COVID, but it's not a bad time to be an entrepreneur. It's not a bad time to be innovative. So I would say, please keep going. This continent has a fair amount of unemployment, and really entrepreneurship is a driver of solving that problem. So I would say, and successful entrepreneurship on this continent is important, and when in doubt between working at a blue chip or trying entrepreneurship, I would say give it a go, and
give it a go.
And you might up being the next envy that everybody talks about.
Indeed. Bas, thank you for your time. It's been a wonderful experience.
Thank you.
We'll hopefully get to dig deeper into the knowledge that you have for African startups, and people are also encouraged to contact entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs as regards their startups and funding opportunities. Bas, thank you so much once again.
Thank you for having me, Tunji.
All right, you take care.
Cheers.
Bye.